Hey everybody, this is Steve, and today I'm going to talk about the first part of the mini-series that I'm doing for John 13. This is a part in the Bible where Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, and I just think there's so much beautiful imagery in this, and then even just from a practical way to show an act of service or to do something to physically love someone, it's a pretty incredible thing. And one, as we'll kind of see culturally, there's huge significance. But also, I don't like feet. And so for me, I'm just like, this is gross. I would never want to do this for someone. And Jesus, I get that there's a lot of humility that we'll see Jesus has in doing this act. But I think it's very practical. And I think with that, there's kind of a greater theological message that goes along with that and how spiritually Jesus wants to clean us too. So it's kind of the setup for the message. But to begin with, for a little context, this is right before Passover, or actually they're going into Passover when he's washing their feet. And this is a Jewish holiday that is super fascinating if you get a chance. It really foreshadows Jesus and his coming, but it's way too nerdy probably for the nature of this video and maybe those that are watching it. You can DM me if you want to talk about that. But he's at Passover. Judas has already decided in his heart to betray him, and he's pretty much just about to get crucified. And he knows this. He knows what's going to happen. It's not a mystery to Jesus. He's been talking about it to his disciples for a little bit now. And so it says at the beginning, and this is so important because I think this is just always God's heart for us, whether it's the classic John 3:16, like for God so loved the world, then he sent his one and only son, he loved him first, is what they emphasize. In this, it says, Jesus wanted to show his full extent of his love to his disciples at this Passover feast. And the way that he chooses to do this is through washing their feet. And so this is totally out of a place of love. And again, practically, what an act, right? He is cleaning this super dirty part of them. This would have represented pretty much the dirtiest part of a person back in that time. At best, they would have had, some sort of open-toed sandal. So your feet naturally would get very dirty. Roads aren't what we imagine them to be nowadays. Animals were a lot more frequently used, so you probably could have stepped in things you didn't want to step in. And you didn't have Foot Locker, the Nike outlet to just go to if your shoes did have an issue, or just to get a new pair every 3 months or whatever. So I imagine people probably used the same shoes for quite a while, would be my guess, or had to get good at constructing their own. So I say all this basically to say your feet would have been very dirty. And I've heard in sermons before from other pastors that it would have been it wouldn't even been expected that a servant would have been forced to clean someone's feet. And so this was a pretty lowly act, is what I've heard. And as you can imagine, this is a very dirty part of the body, arguably the most dirty is what I'm going to say. And Jesus willingly, the Messiah, the King of the universe, right? Lord over all, it says he takes off his robe and he goes and he washes his disciples' feet. And it's just what imagery of laying down his crown to serve and love these people through this very again, physical act of service. And so one, I just think man, we need to be humble, right? How often is our pride of our position, our crown, causing us to not love people in this same manner, in a way where oh, that's too low for me. And whether that's you doing dishes for your roommate, whether that's you giving your wife or husband a foot rub, I'm not saying you have to do that. I think feet are gross. So again, I wouldn't want to give a foot rub. But think about what things are our crown that we need to lay down to humble ourselves and not have so much pride that we're not loving people in this way. And I just think even through practical acts of service, there's a very spiritual component in the sense that I believe we are harnessing God's love in ourselves towards another person. And I think that has the power to spiritually transform and getting to experience Christ's love in that way. And so I think that in itself is pretty cool. And it's awesome to see Jesus do that and very loving. But I believe if we look at this, he's giving us imagery for what I would call more of a spiritual cleansing, for more of a, there's some theology, I guess you could kind of say, behind it. But I think there's a spiritual cleansing that he wants to do in us. And so he's going to his disciples and he's cleaning their feet as they are, like dirty, like they haven't had a chance to necessarily make them clean at this point, and he's washing them. And like what would be offensive to so many people in this culture, in this time, he's saying, nope, like I love you just as you are, and I love this part of you. Not necessarily the grime and dirt. He's trying to get rid of that, but he loves like this thing that represents whatever could separate us from others. You know, I believe it represents sin, is what this, like these dirty feet would represent. Like that's what he would need to clean from us, is our sin. And I think sin is just such a loaded word nowadays. I think we think of a lot of just like judgment and all these other things, and like probably when we begin to talk about sin, it begins to divide us. But I would say the way I'd like to kind of frame sin is like it says in the Bible that we were created in the image of God. And so I think there's an innate beauty that he's given us and wants to be expressed through us. And anything that tries to destroy that image of God that we were created in, which oftentimes is selfishness, can be the root of it, I believe is sin. I think anything that relationally tries to destroy like relationships we have with God or others is sin. And so I think those are kind of the big broad categories of really like what sin can be and what it can accomplish. And sin can be something that out of selfishness we can do and kind of negatively affect others, but sin can also be something that negatively affects us and makes us feel dirty, right? Like there's certain sins that can be done to me or someone else that now I carry that around and I might feel dirty because of it. And I would be the first to tell you, like, that's not fair and you shouldn't have to feel that way. But I think the reality is that that's happened to a lot of us. And so I say that to say Jesus still loves you. Like whatever you feel like you've done that makes you dirty or that's been done to you that makes you dirty, bring that to Jesus and he still loves you. He still wants to like clean those parts of you in a way where it's leading to relational wholeness with him and with others. Because that's the second part that we see to this, is that he says to now do this for others. And so before we move on to that piece, I don't want to pass up on kind of opportunity to talk more about letting Jesus clean our feet. I think in some ways that's an invitation to follow Jesus, right? Like for him to be the one that cleans our feet and makes them clean. And kind of in the sense of like there might be a one-time act part to this where there's an intentionality and decision to say, hey, I want to receive what you want to give me, Jesus. What you said you came to the world to do. Like I accept that and I want to like choose to follow you now. But I think for me, at least in my own faith, in my own daily walk, my feet keep getting dirty. And so for me, I need to daily go to Jesus and say, hey, please wash my feet. Like I need you to clean these again. And the number one way that I'm going to say, at least for myself, that sin tries to get in the way of my relationship with God and others is again to make me feel gross and like I'm not good enough or deserve to be in relationship. And even knowing what Jesus did, like that will still be an obstacle. And so I think rather than just being a better person or just trying harder, like we need to remember that it's all about what Jesus did for us, and that is what transforms our heart. I can never try hard enough. I can never get good enough to be in relational well-being with God or others. Like I'm always going to fall short, but I can receive his grace and love because of what he's done. And that's what transforms me. It gives me freedom now where the shame goes away and I can be loved by him. And then I can go try to love others similarly. And so that's the thing, is like when he says to go wash other people's feet, whether that's like physically, again, us doing these acts of service, like feeding someone who's hungry, showing someone unconditional positive regard who might be going through like an addiction or who's just maybe hard to love sometimes. It's like that in itself, like that physical part obviously has a lot of value, but also like spiritually now and in kind of this relational sense, the shame or guilt that maybe they would have had to experience, like we get to kind of encourage them in that to like, hey, guess what? I still love you. Like I get what you did was jacked up. I get that it's hard to love, but you know what? I've received this kind of love and I want to in some way extend that to you. And so, yeah, I think that's my main message. And just to some real quick takeaways. are just one, like God loves you right now as you are. And so don't let anything separate you from coming to him as you are. Like sin only wins if you let it prevent you from coming to God. So like if that's what you're in need of in this moment, in a way where you've been hiding from God or feeling like you're not good enough, like I hope you can just release that and give that to him and just trust in what he did and that he loves you right now where you're at. And that's the truth. And then secondly, like let's do that for others. Let's look at people, receive God's love in a way now where we've experienced that, and try to share that with others and try to have this relational wholeness and wellness. And then third, I think just that humility. Like where do we need to, like Jesus takes off his robe, and I kind of see it as like laying down his crown. Where do we need to lay down our crown to be able to love people in a way where our pride's not preventing us from loving them well, right? I know this is something I need to work on. All these things, it's again, my feet are continually being washed by Jesus, right? And so it's not in condemnation. It's an encouragement and getting to receive this and do this. And then I think just the last piece, and this is always what I want to do, I hope this creates a bridge maybe for someone, if you don't describe yourself as a Christ follower, that you can see the beauty in this message of how much it talks about Jesus loving the world and people, and then how much we're supposed to, as Christ followers, go and love others. And I hope that you're seeing that from us as Christ followers, and we are going to fall short. But yeah, I hope that we're doing that well. And so Christ followers, definitely, like, let's do that. Let's strive toward this. And then, yeah, those of you that aren't, I hope you can see the value in that. Us striving to do this, even if we aren't a Christ follower, really seems like a good practice and a strong way to live. And yeah, so I don't know. Hopefully that connects us all a little bit more. But then the final piece is, if ever like what you see or hear on these, you want to talk more about it, you have questions, you have constructive criticism, please DM me. I'm going to put my Instagram direct message, well, my Instagram handle, we'll call it, in the comment section. I might somehow get it up here on the screen. I'm not very good at video editing yet, so maybe I won't. And then, yeah, even if this is your first time somehow just stumbling across this message of, like, I guess, who Jesus is and what it means to follow him or be loved by him, and you have more questions, or you're just like, I don't know if God's real, and you seem like someone who's relatable and I want to talk to you, you're more than welcome to. Feel free to DM me in that case too. I can just share with you, this is the Bible. I believe it's the story of Jesus. I can share how I've read this and it spoke to me and what that's looked like for me to try to walk that out. But then I can also point you toward other people too, who might be able to give you a slightly different perspective or their own journey in walking it out. Can point you towards some resources. So yeah, my hopes is whether you've been walking with Christ your whole life or you've never heard anything about Jesus, that you'd feel comfortable knowing that you could DM me about that. So yeah, I just hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys, and just peace and grace.